Welcome back, everybody. I'm Zach, and that's Tyler over there. And we are so excited to bring you our season preview. The NFL is finally back. By the time you're watching this, it'll be approximately 24 hours until the NFL season kicks off in Philadelphia. And we have a lot to cover today. And before we jump in to some shocking news, I want to at least tell you guys what we're going to cover today because it's going to be a longer episode. So we will first be covering the Micah Parsons trade. We're going to recap it, tell you what it means for both teams involved in the trade and for the rest of the NFL. That includes my Lions. Then we're going to preview our season by talking about who we think is going to win each of the major awards in the NFL, so that we can come back to it and see how right we were at the end of the season. And then we're going to do a new segment that work in progress name. We're going to call it Fantasy Football Tinder. We're just going to talk about some players that you should swipe right on this week that we think are going to be really good, that have great matchups, and some other players that we're not so hot on that you should swipe left on this week. Name TBD, segment TBD, but we will be covering fantasy football every week. We just wanted to try out little fantasy football Tinder today. And then finally, Tyler's going to give us the top 5 matchups that you must watch this week, because you can't watch them all. You got to pick and choose. And there are 5 matchups that we think that you should set time aside for to watch this week in the NFL. But without further ado, Tyler, what on earth are the Dallas Cowboys doing?
So my hot take is I'm with the Cowboys on this because originally when you first see like the disputes going on between Micah Parsons and the Cowboys, and then there's a trade, it's like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? How could the Cowboys let him go? But then I saw what the Cowboys offered Micah Parsons. They offered him a 5-year deal worth over $40 million per year. And he said no. Which tells me that Micah Parsons was correct in him saying, I no longer want to be a Dallas Cowboy. So you could either trade Micah Parsons, get 2 first-round draft picks and a viable starter for him, or keep him on your team for 1 more year and then lose him to free agency. To me, this is very Tyreek Hill with the Chiefs-esque. They offered him a very reasonable contract. He said no, and then you got something out of him instead of losing him to free agency. I'm with the Cowboys on this.
So I agree that the Cowboys probably were better off trading him. They would get more from trading him, but I disagree that they offered him a reasonable contract, because the contract was worth $40.5 million a year. And that's less than TJ Watt's contract. And TJ Watt is over 30 years old. And Micah Parsons is 26 and is an all world player. Since entering the league, he leads the NFL in pressures. So I think that he earned a little bit more than TJ Watt based on his play. And Dallas
Do you
just
know how
wasn't
much
willing to.
less it is?
Um, I
Sorry, I didn't
believe
mean to
it's
interrupt you there.
I believe it's either 1 million or half a million dollars less than TJ Watt. Um, and for context for everyone watching, Micah Parsons did then go on to sign a $47 million contract in Green Bay, which is either 6 or $6.5 million more than he would have gotten in Dallas per year. That's a significant raise. So,
And I agree that, you know what, maybe Micah Parsons is worth that 47 instead of 40 and a half. But kind of like Tyreek Hill with the Chiefs, they didn't have that money. They don't have Micah Parsons' money, and so the only thing left to do is, like I said, either trade him or lose him to free agency next year.
yeah, and here's the thing. I believe that the compensation reflects how desperate the Cowboys were to get value out of Micah Parsons before it was really too late, because a lot of people are comparing this trade to deals that have happened in the past, like the Jamal Adams trade, which Jamal Adams in Seattle was never as good as he was with the New York Jets. And there are other
Mhm.
trade compensations that just pale in comparison to seemingly what is a steal for Green Bay. But I'm here to say that it's not all sunshines and rainbows for Green Bay, because we kind of talked about the impact on Dallas. They get 2 first-round picks and they get a starter in Kenny Clark, who is in his age 30 season, and has not been an upper echelon player, but he will still improve an interior defensive line in Dallas that was struggling to find an identity with failed first round pick Mozzie Smith not producing at all. They really need someone to shore down that spot. So it does fill a need for Dallas. It gives them capital. And most importantly, it frees up money to pay some other stars. They did just re-sign Deron Bland to a big contract with the money that they saved from not paying Micah Parsons. But Green Bay is now saddled with a huge contract with Micah Parsons for the next couple of years. And they are saddled with Jordan Love's massive contract. They are the first NFL team to spend over $100 million per year on just 2 players. No team has ever done it. So it's a very significant move for Green Bay, and it really puts the pressure on them to win right now, because if they don't win the Super Bowl this season, they lose a lot of key depth pieces that in a division that has the Detroit Lions, Minnesota Vikings, and a surging Chicago Bears team. It could put them in serious danger of not being competitive in their own division anymore if they don't win this year.
And to go off that as well, they also lost 2 first-round draft picks. So if you have to lose key pieces, you don't have the first-round capital to replace those pieces.
Right. Because first round draft picks aren't valuable because of the players that you get, not because only of the players that you get in the first round. They're valuable because you get those players at a severe discount for 5 seasons. Because first round draft
Yeah.
picks have the fifth year option. So giving away those picks isn't just being like, oh, you don't get to draft a first round player anymore. You no longer have salary cap flexibility to have good players for cheap. And that's what Green Bay is sacrificing. This is an all-in move by Green Bay for honestly this season. Beyond this season, their future is extremely uncertain. It's so tough to win when you don't have depth in the NFL.
I agree, and that's kind of what have made the Chiefs so successful, is that they've consistently drafted well. If Brett Veach has not drafted well, this dynasty does not become a thing. If McDuffie's draft pick was not good, then losing L'Jarius Sneed would have taken away the defense.
Mm-hmm.
If L'Jarius Sneed was not a good draft pick, then losing Charvarius Ward would have been the end of the dynasty. And you've got to draft well, and if you don't have that capital, I agree. It kind of reminds me of the Los Angeles Rams a few years ago, where they went all in. It worked out for them. They did get their Super Bowl, but now we kind of see them struggling a little bit because they went all in so quickly.
Yeah, they went years without having a first round pick. It was almost a meme that Sean McVay is not going to select in the first round. And you're right, it worked out for them. But I do think that being a quarterback away is being different than an edge rusher away. And I don't think the Packers were an edge rusher away. They
No,
finished
not at all.
they finished third in their division last year, and pass rush wasn't the issue. And now they lost an interior defender, the longest tenured Packer, in Kenny Clark. That's the impact the rest of the NFL is looking at. The Lions are licking their lips in week 1, not only because Micah Parsons is dealing with a back injury and since he sat out the entire did you see that? That he may have to get an epidural before the game. So no way that Micah Parsons, who sat out all of training camp and doesn't know the playbook, will be getting a full game, just even if the back injury wasn't here. And now the back injury probably limits his workload even more. And the Packers don't have Kenny Clark holding down the middle. And the Lions have the best running back room in football, a really tough O-line. The Packers are going to have to find a way to stop the run, especially because Micah Parsons isn't a good run defender either. He's average, maybe even below average. He has a 65 PFF grade.
He's a pass rusher.
Right. He has a 65 PFF grade against the run in the last 2 seasons. So if the Packers can't stop the run, yes, they will get to the quarterback more, and that's huge, but it could just open up another weakness for them that they don't have the first round picks to solve. So it's an interesting dichotomy. We're going to have to, it's going to test the depth and the coaching staff of Green Bay to see if they can maximize the depth they have right now so that they can take advantage of Micah Parsons before the money gets too restrictive.
Yeah, and kind of using this to segue into our next segment is Micah Parsons is currently leading DraftKings odds in Defensive Player of the Year. Do you agree with this? Who do you have for we're going to start our awards segment on the defensive side of the ball, but who do you have for defensive player of the year?
Yeah, I think that Micah Parsons is a fine choice. There's no denying his chops as a pass rusher, and I think that he will be amazing no matter where he is. He's only 26 years old, and he's one of the most talented players in football. But there's a player that was on track for Defensive Player of the Year before getting hurt, and I think that he's only gotten better in the offseason, and that's Aiden Hutchinson. Same division. Um, I just think that the Lions are going to scheme their entire new defense around making sure he's the priority, and I have him winning Defensive Player of the Year because he should have won it last year if he didn't hurt himself. But I don't hate the people that are betting on Micah Parsons. I think it's a fine bet. What about you?
I've got an AFC pass rusher winning defensive player of the year. I'm going back to TJ Watt. I think the Steelers have a great defense. I think the focal point of that defense is and always has been TJ Watt. I understand. I do think it's a shame that Chris Jones didn't win it a couple years ago when TJ Watt did. But TJ Watt's consistently a great player. I think it's a little bit of a safe bet. But I mean, there's a reason he's won it multiple times, and it's because that defense, that steel curtain, that revitalized steel curtain revolves around TJ Watt.
Yeah, and I think the Steelers defense is only improving, and that only helps TJ Watt. Alex Highsmith and Derek Harmon anchor that D line. Derek Harmon being their first round pick. He will be out a couple of games, but when he comes back, you have to focus on him, and that just it opens things up for TJ Watt. Interior pressure always helps edge rushers. And so I think TJ Watt's in a really good place to succeed. And I don't hate that pick at all. I think that him, Miles Garrett, and Max Crosby should all be considered
Mhm.
front runners for that. I'm just going with Aiden Hutchinson just because I think that he was showing a level of pass rush that I've never seen from a human before last season. I mean, he had 5 sacks against Tampa Bay, and that was the most dominant game I have ever personally watched from an edge rusher. And I think that he's going to pick up right where he left off. But let's move on to offense. Who do you think is going to win the Offensive Player of the Year award?
For offensive player of the year, I have Jamar Chase winning this one. I think he's number one in fantasy. I know that's kind of a jinx putting number one at fantasy as the offensive player of the year, but I think the Bengals feel like they were cheated out of the playoffs last year. They're stupid in feeling that way, but they do feel that way. And so I do think Burrow and Chase are just going to go scorched earth this year. I think they're going to come in with a lot of revenge factor. I think they're going to feed Chase over and over and over again. And I see Chase having a similar season that Tyreek Hill had, where he was on pace to 2,000 yards before he himself got hurt.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I think that as a Calvin Johnson fan, you know that I'm really scared for what Jamar Chase can do to his single
Hmm.
season receiving yards record with an extra game. Um, and I think he's a fine choice. I personally am going Jameer Gibbs. He was the most efficient running back. He finished as the number one running back in fantasy last year. The new offensive coordinator, John Morton, says that he's going to use Jameer Gibbs more. And I think that only lends to him having an even better season with Detroit this year and coming away with Offensive Player of the Year honors, especially because I think the Lions will be better than the Bengals. And I think that team success does factor in to who wins those awards. So if the Bengals win 9 or 10 games and the Lions win 12 or 13 games, I think the edge goes to Gibbs.
I agree with that in the sense where team success is unfortunately a factor. It's why Joe Burrow last year was not really in contention for MVP. But I think Jameer Gibbs is a Chris Jones situation to where he's a lot better than people give him credit for. So I struggle to think that enough people are going to give Jameer Gibbs the credit he deserves. And I struggle to put him at offensive player of the year because he almost hides behind everyone else in that offense, being Amon St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams, etc.
So he finished in the top 8 in Offensive Player of the Year voting last year. And his goal is a thousand season, 1,000 receiving yards, 1,000 rushing yards. If he hits that mark statistically, he'll win it because
That's fair. I will give you that.
that's an extremely difficult mark to make. But if he doesn't have that statistical separation, that thing that everyone can focus on, those graphics that can be posted, I agree. He hides behind the offensive machine that is Detroit, whereas like in an offense like Philadelphia or Cincinnati, Chase and Saquon are kind of the focal points. They don't obviously
Mhm.
the other guys exist, but they are the main guys that everyone points to. So I mean, even in Baltimore with Derrick Henry, I think those guys just take a lot more of the spotlight on their respective teams, whereas the Lions just have so many players um, that they almost kind of get all lumped together. It's just like this offensive conglomerate
Mhm.
of destruction. So I don't know. I think that he will get close to that. I don't think he'll hit it, but if he does hit it, I think he's a lock to win Offensive Player of the Year if he gets thousand.
I do agree with you on that. If he gets 1,000 receiving yards, 1,000 rushing yards, he's absolutely got it. So you've got the Lions sweeping offensive and defensive player of the year. What about rookies? What do you think for rookie offensive player of the year?
I think that it's slam dunk Amari and Hampton. I just don't think that Genty's going to do enough in Las Vegas. I don't think they've made enough improvements on the offensive line. Um, I and I think that the philosophy and game plan is already established in Los Angeles. Run the dang ball, and Hampton is going to do great in that scheme. He's a Harbaugh's dream running back. He will absolutely be dominant in that offense, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. I thought he looked pretty good in the preseason too.
I actually agree with you. Omar and Hampton's my pick as well for offensive rookie of the year. I don't think any of the quarterbacks in this class are going to be better than Hampton and Genty. The case for Genty is we know what Genty can do. Look at Boise State last year versus Boise State this year. And so now flip that with the Raiders, and you can take a mediocre Raiders team to a really good Raiders team. And if that happens, then I think you've got a good case for Ashton Genty. But I agree with you. I don't think he's gonna do that. I don't think he is leading the odds in DraftKings though. Obviously, preseason odds don't really matter at all. And by don't really matter, I mean they don't matter at all. But
Mhm.
it is something noteworthy, I think.
Yeah, and I think that Genty will do fine. I don't think that he's going to be particularly bad. I just think the Chargers will be better. They'll be in more
Mhm,
winning situations, and they're going to have opportunities to give the running backs chances to make plays more often than the Raiders will this season. And that's it. It
mhm.
just simply comes down to that. I actually think Genty's a much better player than Hampton. I just think Hampton's in a much better situation. It's kind of like the a Daniels versus Caleb Williams kind of scenario. Jaden Daniels was in an amazing situation last year and he balled out, but a lot of people still think that Caleb Williams is the better player. But uh, Daniels proved that his situation trumped everything and he really balled out with the Commanders. Obviously, they're both only second year players, so only time will tell who's better. But speaking of rookies, what about defensive rookies? Who do you think is going to win that award?
For that, I'm staying in the AFC West for that award. I'm going with Jahad Barron, the rookie cornerback for the Denver Broncos. I think they drafted him first round. If you remember back from our draft recap, he was my number one corner. I
Mhm.
loved Barron. I thought he was the most talented cornerback in the draft. He's coming into a very good Denver defensive team. He's got a great defensive coordinator. He's got a great mentor, the defensive player of the year last year, to teach him how to be better. And I think he's kind of like you said about Hampton. I think he's coming into a great situation in Denver to just maximize the talent that he's already going to have on day one.
Yeah, and you mentioned how good the Denver defense is. I think one of the things that makes them good to great is the corner opposite of Jade Barron, and that's Pat Sertan the second. He is going to
Hmm.
get the Darrell Revis treatment. Nobody's going to throw him the ball at all. He is such a lockdown prototypical corner that's going to take away entire sides of the field, and that's going to leave Jade Barron with an opportunity of a lifetime. And I think we were both really high on him in our draft analysis. I think he could have a Sauce Gardner level rookie season where he wins that as a corner. That's kind of the last season we can point to of a corner just taking over. And remember, he was opposite of DJ Reed that season, who was a very, very good corner out of Kansas State, who's was able to kind of funnel balls towards him. I think that's going to happen to Barron. I think he's in a great opportunity, but he will not do better than Abdul Carter will in New York. Abdul Carter was my favorite defender of the entire draft. And speaking of situations, oh boy, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Abdul Carter on that defensive line. They could win games by themselves. They could start Tyler Kirkhart at quarterback and win 5 games. I just think that it's too good to be true for Carter to go to that situation. I think he's going to have a really nice time rushing opposite of those guys, and it's going to lead to a lot of sacks.
I agree with you. My argument against it, however, is kind of like what you said with Chase at Offensive Player of the Year. Team success.
Mm.
I don't think overall the Giants' defense is going to be great. Their pass rush is going to be phenomenal. Like you said, they've got a great defensive line. I think that's where the defense stops. And so if the defense is giving up a lot of points and yards, even if it's because of the secondary, I think that's going to hide his success, even if he's getting 4 or 5 sacks a game. If he's getting 4 or 5 sacks a game, he'll win it. But like,
He will
I
win
think the defense
Defensive
is
Player of the
set.
Year. He might win.
Yeah, no, 100%. If he's averaging 4 or 5 sacks a game, I use that as hyperbole, of course, but I think any good rookie success is going to be shadowed by the rest of the Giants' defense being terrible and their
Yeah,
offense also being terrible.
I don't hate that take, and I think that honestly, either one of our picks is good. The only reason that I lean Abdul Carter still is just because I feel like sacks are more consistent production than interceptions. Interceptions,
It's
a
fair.
lot of it relies on quarterback play on the opposite side. If you play against Patrick Mahomes twice a year, it's really tough to get picks because he just takes care of the ball. And so does Herbert, and so does Geno Smith. And so that's 6 games right there. Whereas Abdul Carter, I think, can get sacks against any team. You don't even if you have an elite offensive line, he's still going to get to you. So we'll have to see how that plays out as the season progresses.
I like that argument against it.
Mm-hmm. But that's not to take away anything from Barron. I think he's phenomenal, and if the stones fall his way, it's going to be hard to dethrone him as the Rookie of the Year this year. But we agree on another player and another award. Comeback Player of the Year. Aiden Hutchinson is my
It,
choice.
there's no way it's not Aiden Hutchinson. As long as Aiden Hutchinson doesn't just become a garbage defensive lineman this year, he's gonna win that award. It he snapped his leg late into the season. Like you said, he was on pace
Week
to win
5.
defensive. It was week 5.
Yeah, he had 7.5
I thought it was
sacks through 4.5 games.
maybe that's why I thought it was late in the season because he already had 7.5 sacks.
Yeah.
I thought it was later, but yeah, I mean, the fact that he was making such an impact 5 games in, as long as he has a focal point in the Detroit Lions offense, I don't know how it
Defense.
can't be Aiden Hutchinson. Did I say
Yeah.
offense?
Yeah.
Listen, it's getting late over here, right? The coffee's worn off a long time ago, but either way, Aiden Hutchinson, yes, you have no arguments against Aiden Hutchinson from me.
I think the only guy that could come close is Christian McCaffrey. He was who I was waffling. If he has a healthy season, it will be a tight race, and Hutchinson will have to then put up the stats necessary. And if he wins Defensive Player of the Year, then it's no doubt that he's Comeback Player of the Year for me. So that made my choice up. I don't think that Christian McCaffrey has what it takes to dethrone Henry, Gibbs, or Saquon or Chase from Offensive Player of the Year. So I don't think he's
Mhm.
getting anywhere close to that. So I think Hutchinson takes both those awards easily.
I also don't think Christian McCaffrey has the same focal point that Aiden Hutchinson does on their respective sides of the ball. When you look at the 49ers offense, obviously CMC's there, but you do have Brock Purdy, you do have George Kittle. You've got these other kind of, I don't want to say mid, but not superstar, but decent wide receivers. On the Detroit Lions side of the ball, it's Aiden Hutchinson. And then a couple other good players, of course, but not superstars. Aiden Hutchinson is the focal point on Detroit defensively.
And that's fair. And that definitely gives him a leg up.
Mhm.
But do we want to do MVP or Coach of the Year next?
Let's save MVP for last.
Okay. Well, it doesn't matter. We agree on both.
Oh, we agree on both?
We do. I said Ben
Ah,
Johnson's Coach of the Year, but I'm actually going to change my answer to Aaron Glenn because I've been thinking about it, and I don't think that Ben Johnson's going to have enough success. So
I agree. I'm trying to think who I originally had because I originally changed my pick. It wasn't Aaron Glenn. Um, Jim Harbaugh was my original pick. But when I think about Harbaugh, the coach of the year is not who's the best coach.
right,
It is who is expected to suck that doesn't suck. The Chargers have once again won the preseason pick for AFC West champion. So the Chargers are expected to do well. So if Harbaugh does well, great, met the bar. The Bears are the Bears. And even though there's been a lot of hype this offseason, they're expected to suck. They're in my opinion, the best division in football. And if the Bears have a winning record, it's Ben Johnson because they are expected to suck in a tough division. And so if they don't suck, it goes to Ben Johnson.
that's true. And I appreciate what you said about the Coach of the Year award. It was made a sham last year when Kevin O'Connell was given it over Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell swept Kevin O'Connell, won the number one seed for the first time in team history with a team that had 22 players on IR. And
Yeah.
they gave it to the guy he beat twice. So I don't know. It's a silly
And it's
award.
because the Lions were expected to do well. So when Campbell did well, it's great. Gold star.
I,
The Vikings were not expected to do well. Sam Darnold was expected to suck, and when they didn't suck, it went to McCarthy.
uh,
O'Connell. Jeez.
and so that's why I have my answer as Glenn. I think Ben Johnson's a fine answer because I do think, but I think the problem with saying Ben Johnson is you're betting on the Bears to succeed. And look at Dan
And I
Campbell.
am, honestly.
Look at Dan Campbell and his success in Detroit. He won 3 games in his first year because the first year was built on finding the culture, the team identity, sticking to it, and that meant losing some games because you stuck to your identity. Watching Dan Campbell go for it on 4th down in a season where he lost 13 games was really hard because a lot of those decisions didn't pay off. But he stuck with it, and that's why his team won 15 games last season. So Ben Johnson's going to have to find his identity, and if that means sticking to his guns and losing a couple of games to stick to his guns and kind of follow in the footsteps of his mentor, I think that may be what happens, especially since his situation is so hard. The NFC North is easily the hardest division in football with the addition of Micah Parsons to the Packers. It's going to be tough for the Bears to crack third place, much less a winning record. So that's why I'm giving it to Aaron Glenn. I thought he was the most talented coach going into the coaching carousel. And I think the Jets are sneaky candidates to win more games than they're supposed to. Not that they'll compete in their
My
division, but
my final counter to why I do think the Bears will succeed, and then we'll move on to MVP, is the Bears were really close in a lot of games last year. I mean, they almost beat Detroit last year in Detroit, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously they didn't because Matty Eberflus is stupid. But I mean, if you get any competence within the coaching staff, they beat Detroit last year. And so now bringing in a competent coach that's going to do better in other games too, with the influx of players that they brought in to help out as well, I think they're going to be successful.
yeah, they're certainly in a better position to win in Ben Johnson's inaugural season than the Lions were in Dan Campbell's inaugural season. I'll give you that.
Mhm.
Um, but I just think that they're going to need a couple of years for Ben to get his guys in there because right
And
now
that's fair.
none of those guys are his. A couple of them maybe, but
And so who was your ultimate pick? You said you changed it from Ben Johnson. Who's your
I, s-
pick for coach
I
of the year?
I chose Aaron Glenn just because I feel like the
Aaron Glenn. That's great.
Dolphins, the Dolphins and the Patriots are weaker teams, and if there's anyone who's going to rise above, Obviously, he's not dethroning the Bills, but if he finishes second in the division with the New York Jets and they push for a playoffs late in the season, I think ultimately that he'll take the award.
That's fair. And then MVP, we agree that it's going to be Burrow. I've given my case that the Bengals think they were screwed and cheated out of a playoffs. They're going to come in with a ridiculous identity of revenge on their mind and just go scorched earth. We've seen Mahomes win it twice. We've seen Jackson win it a couple times. We've seen Burrow get his shot, and now we
Allen.
saw Allen get his shot, and now it's time for Burrow.
Yeah, and I think that seeing Joe Burrow fully healthy was really scary. He is a terrifying quarterback to face. Um,
Yeah.
what's really going to hurt him is if they can protect him. He's taken a lot of sacks and a lot of hits over his years in Cincinnati. And so if he stays fully healthy again, there's not a whole lot of people that I think can play at a higher level than him. Because
Mhm.
Mahomes, as talented as he is, he's mostly being asked to do his job in Kansas City and not make spectacular plays week in and week out like he was doing in 2018 when they needed that. And so I just don't think he's making a push for any more MVPs anytime soon. And
Mhm.
that really leaves, to me, Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow. And I think that Joe Burrow will end up taking it solely because he didn't take it last year. Lamar Jackson deserved to win his third MVP last year, and he didn't. So
Mhm.
I think that the voters have fatigue related to Lamar, and they will end up going Joe if he has a season similar to last year and the team makes the playoffs. And I do believe both those things will happen.
I agree. Let's get into our new segment, Fantasy Football Tinder. Zach, you're going to present a handful of players, and we're going to decide if we swipe left and bench this player this week in fantasy football, or if we're going to swipe right and start this player in fantasy football. You want to lead us
Gotcha.
off with our first profile on Fantasy Football Tinder?
Sure. So we're going to start with Arizona Cardinals running back James Conner. Do you want to go first, or do you want to kind of see where you swipe, and then I'll give you my reasoning?
My initial thoughts, just based on the vibes, is a swipe left. I think the Cardinals are really struggling a lot, and I
I,
think it usually takes them a couple weeks to find their stuff. I think he's a very sleeper pick, but for week 1, I swipe left.
and I think if they were playing any other team, I would agree with you. But they are playing the New Orleans Saints this week. And I think that the Saints are going to be putrid. I think of the Saints the same way I thought of the New York Giants last season, and they were really bad. And the Saints are about to be really bad because they don't have a quarterback. And so I think James Conner finishes the RB11 last year. He's fully healthy. They improved the offensive line. They will be in a winning game plan for the second half, I imagine, because there's no way they're playing the Saints close. And James Conner has huge upside in week 1, in my opinion. So I'm swiping right on James Conner.
I can get behind putting him in a flex spot, depending on who you're comparing him against. What about profile number 2?
Profile number 2 is Josh Jacobs with his matchup against
Josh,
Detroit.
Jac- Josh Jacobs is a swipe left for me because of the matchup. Detroit has a great run stopping defense. They've been one of the best run stopping defenses in the league. In general, Josh Jacobs is going to be a start every single week for me, but not against this Detroit Lions run defense.
Yeah, and I agree with you that he is a swipe left for me. Um, the Lions fit in the same category as Kansas City does, in my opinion. You just don't want to start a running back against them. Uh,
Hmm.
for two reasons. Number one, they prioritize great defense and stopping the run because of their front seven is elite. The Chiefs' front seven is elite. The Lions' front seven is elite. They stop the run at a high level. And number two, teams that play these teams are often in losing game scripts and can't afford to hand the ball off 15 to 20 times. They're probably passing. And Josh Jacobs is not a huge threat out of the backfield. He doesn't catch a whole lot of passes. He does sometimes, but I think in a losing game script, you can't just keep checking it down to Josh Jacobs. The Lions allowed the 7th lowest fantasy points to running backs last season, and their defense was decimated. Fully healthy Lions defense, it's going to be tough for me to say plug in Josh Jacobs to be confident about his play in week 1.
I agree with that. So we're both
But
swiping left there.
we are both swiping left on Josh Jacobs. The next player is staying in the NFC North, DeAndre Swift versus the Vikings.
To me, this is very dependent on who he is playing, or it's in terms of who I'm comparing him against. Who else can I go with? And I think if I have to ask that question, he's probably a swipe left for me.
I agree. And I think for two reasons he's a swipe left. The first reason is he's debuting under Ben Johnson, who had DeAndre Swift in Detroit and did not utilize him. Okay? That's when Jamal Williams broke Barry Sanders' touchdown record because DeAndre Swift wasn't scoring those touchdowns. It was someone else. And number two, Vikings are an incredibly good defense, and I expect them to be up in this game for the vast majority, even with a rookie quarterback. Fade DeAndre Swift because he won't get his goal line reps due to Ben Johnson, and he's playing a good team.
I am over 3 on finding someone to swipe right on. I think you're 1 for 3.
Yes, I'm 1 for 3.
All right, let's see who our next one is. Maybe we've got a match next round.
I have Drake May versus the Raiders.
I'm gonna swipe right because number one, if Drake May is your starting quarterback, then you obviously don't have Allen or Burrow or Mahomes. But I think the Raiders is a good matchup for Drake. I don't think that the Raiders have been prioritizing defense outside of like a guy like Max Crosby. So I think the Raiders starting off with first game with the new head coach also, who have been prioritizing offense. I don't see their defense being that great. And I think Mike Vrabel being the Patriots head coach is going to be I think he's a big players coach and people are going to want to go get him that first win. So they're going to be firing on all cylinders in New England in week 1.
Yeah, this is a swipe right for me as well. Drake May is facing last year's 25th best scoring defense in the NFL. And the Raiders, they were bottom quarter of the league. And while I do think Pete Carroll will improve on that this season, it won't be in this game because Drake May has an improved offensive line. If you remember, they invested in offensive tackle in the 4th pick of the draft. They also brought in Stephon Diggs and a rookie running back to help round out that backfield. Drake May has everything set up to have an even better year 2. And he had a great year 1 for that situation. So I think he will improve on that in his first matchup against a relatively weak opponent in the Raiders. Next player is David Montgomery.
Who's the matchup again?
Packers.
I think it depends. Honestly, I'm swiping right either way. David Montgomery, it depends on what you think the carry load's going to be with him versus Jahmyr Gibbs. But overall, I think the Lions do a good job at balancing their running backs. And I don't think, like, to your credit, Micah Parsons is not a run stopping defender. He is a pass rushing defender. And and them losing their interior defensive linemen, I think there's going to be a lot of holes in that Packer running defense, and so I'm swiping right on David Montgomery.
Yeah, this is a huge swipe right. Losing Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark was a good player, but he was a great player against the Lions. He was a Lion killer because he stood directly in the path of what they wanted to do, which is run up the middle, run power up the middle. Kenny Clark, for a long time, was just a force, especially against Detroit, and he's gone. And so they added a player who's mediocre in the run. New offensive coordinator John Morton says he's going to split Jahmyr Gibbs out at wide receiver more often this year as like a kind of a slot player, which means David Montgomery is on the field a lot more often. I think that the balance will remain between that backfield, and David Montgomery is going to get a lot more work than people are expecting. So this is a huge swipe right this week, especially. And I think going forward in the season too, he's going to show up on this list a lot, and for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
He only had 2 performances in fantasy last year that were not in double digits, and one of them he was hurt. So David Montgomery, the most consistent player in fantasy football, in my opinion, and he will continue that this season. But our next player is Isaiah Pacheco.
Isaiah Pacheco against the Chargers, he's a swipe right for me. I think the Chiefs' run game's gonna be good. Pacheco has his hits and misses, but with Rashee Rice out, I think they're gonna wanna stack the run game a lot more, really establish the season as a running situations. He's a swipe right. Just kinda short and sweet, simple ideas.
Right. And I agree with you. He's a swipe right. There's no secret that the weapons behind Isaiah Pacheco in the backfield are nothing special. We watched training camp and we know what the decisions the Chiefs made at cutdowns. It's still Kareem Hunt back there. He has been not explosive at all. And on the contrary, Isaiah Pacheco looks to have recovered a little bit of that burst, that acceleration, that explosiveness that we saw in 2023 that made him such an intriguing player. So if he returns to that form here in week one and gets 70+% of the workload out of the backfield, it's a no-brainer. Isaiah Pacheco is a swipe right for the week one matchup. Next player, running back Javonte Williams versus the Eagles. He is the starting running back for Dallas.
Swipe left for me. I think the Eagles on banner night, home opener, prime time, nothing stopping that defense or that offense. And
Yeah.
I'll actually end up talking about that matchup here in our next segment. But swipe left for me. Anyone on Dallas, I'm swiping left this week,
Yeah.
except for maybe CeeDee Lamb.
Uh, even CeeDee Lamb, because of how good that secondary and that pass rush is. But Javonte Williams is the guy we're talking about. And he, despite being the clear number one back, I don't think the game plan is going to allow for him to get very many carries in the second half.
Mm-mm.
And I think it's a matchup nightmare for any running back, especially for a guy like Javonte Williams, who I don't think is particularly in the upper echelon for the NFL. This next one is going to be controversial, Tyler. It's Terry McLaurin versus the Giants.
Terry McLaurin versus the Giants. I mean, he's a swipe right for me. I know he's on a solid offensive team, but I don't like the Giants secondary. I like their pass rush, but I don't like the Giants secondary. Terry McLaurin is an easy swipe right for me.
Okay, and here's why I'm going to tell you that he's a swipe left, at least for this week. Number one, he sat out all of training camp. Okay, that's usually does not bode well for wide receivers. Look at Brandon Ayuk last year. Okay, uh, number two, facing the New York Giants last season, he put up performances of 22 and 19 yards, both matchups. He was held to under 25 yards in both matchups against the last year's Giants team, which was worse and doesn't have as potent of a pass rush. And I just don't like this matchup. He was bad against the Giants last year. I don't see that changing. I see it getting worse, and I see him being out of sync with his quarterback due to missing training camp. Fade or swipe left on Terry McLaurin for week one, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. I'll take the disagreement on that one.
And our final player is Mark Andrews for the Ravens against the Bills, another marquee matchup that you'll cover later.
I'm gonna swipe left on Andrews. I was very high on Andrews last year. It was a reach, and I got burnt, and I cannot get burnt twice. I am not a Mark Andrews fan. I think the Ravens really like a lot of their other receivers, especially with Isaiah Likely in the mix as well. That being said, and that's not even me factoring in the Bills defense. I know the Bills defense is not great, but in kind of their marquee matchup, I think they're gonna be okay. They do a decent job at stopping the Ravens. I don't like Mark Andrews in week one.
So this one's another one that kind of has some extenuating circumstances. Isaiah Likely is not practicing. He has a foot injury from a surgery he sustained in the offseason, and he is not expected to play. So if Mark Andrews is the only option at tight end for the Ravens, he has incredible chemistry with Lamar Jackson against a team that I don't think has the linebacking core or safety to cover him. Mark Andrews is a huge swipe right, at least in week one until Likely returns.
I had actually forgotten about Likely's injury. That's a good point because, yeah, it's weird how good Likely is when he's playing and how Andrew's stats just plummet when Likely plays.
Yeah, and well, I lean on Andrews later in the season as well. We forget that he had 11 touchdowns last season. Am I saying he's going to recreate that? No, but he is a he is a huge red zone threat for Lamar Jackson, who threw 41 passing touchdowns this year. I don't expect that to slow down. I expect him to be just as good. And with Andrews getting all of the tight end one reps because of Likely's injury, don't expect him to have any fall off in this week due to age or anything like that. He's fully healthy. The chemistry remains with his quarterback. I think he's a huge swipe right, at least for week 1. We may see him later on in the season being a swipe left candidate, but due to everything going on in Baltimore, definitely got to keep him in your lineups.
I understand that. I do want to get to our final segment as we're running out of time. This is going to be our marquee matchups. There are 5 key matchups that I think are must-watch television this week, and it starts Thursday night, banner night. I don't think it's going to be a close game, but I do think it is must-watch television. Cowboys at Eagles. It is the second ever banner night for the Philadelphia Eagles. It is a heated NFC rivalry. It's going to be Dak versus Jalen Hurts. I'm excited to watch this. Football is going to be back. It's going to be electricity in the air for the fans, for the players alike. I think it's going to be a great game. That being said, Eagles by a million still. My second one is happening on Friday night. That's going to be Chiefs at Chargers in Brazil. I'm super excited for this as both a Chiefs fan and an NFL fan. I think we are going to see a Chiefs team that finally has a Hollywood Brown wide receiver that isn't immediately off an injury. Obviously, we're not going to have Rashee Rice, but we're going to see Andy Reid versus Jim Harbaugh, 2 legendary coaches in one respect or another, one way or the other. And I think it's going to be electric. Chiefs Chargers is always a close game. It's going to be way too close for comfort, and I am predicting at least one very controversial call, whether it's for or against the Chiefs. Carl Sheffers is the ref of that game. Chiefs fans hate Carl Sheffers. NFL fans hate the Chiefs. I think we can watch some officiating calls that game as well. My number 3 is Lions at Packers. This is my only non-primetime game this week that I have for a must-watch. It's Lions at Lambeau Field. It's going to be the 100th sometime that they've ever played each other in history, but I think the Packers, to your credit, or to what you said earlier, are going all in on this season, and I think so are the Lions. I think this is a make or break year for the Lions as well, along with the Packers, meeting them in week 1 in Lambeau Field. I think that's going to be a nationally televised game as well. That's my Sunday afternoon pick of must-watch TV. My number 4 then goes to Ravens-Bills. It is a matchup of the MVP candidates last season, Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. It is in Buffalo. It is the start of their farewell season in Buffalo as well. That's going to be another one where it's going to be electric. MVP on the road against Josh Allen, who a lot of people give good points for should have been MVP. I think that's going to be a slugfest. That's going to be a shootout all night long, and it's going to be so electric. And finally, Monday Night Football. Actually, not quite as exciting as the other matchup, but I do think it's my top 5 is Vikings at Bears. The Bears have had so much hype this offseason, and Ben Johnson's going to get a national stage to present to the world what he has done and what Chicago is probably going to be like. I think the Vikings are going to regress. I think the Bears are going to be better, and I think it's going to be one good football game.
I think those are all solid picks. I especially agree with that Sunday mid-afternoon pick. I will be seated and ready to go for that one. I'm so excited for the NFL to be back. I want to watch as many games as I possibly can fit on my TV screen this week, because if I could watch all however many there are, 16, right? I would watch all 16. But I think that's all we have for you guys today. Huge birthday shout out to Caden Merrick, and we are excited to watch the NFL with you guys this weekend, and tune in next week for our week 1 recap. Thanks all for watching.
Appreciate you guys.